Hi, my name is Christian Castellanos, and today I'll be giving a presentation on a large-scale study of file system contents published in 1999 by John R. Dusser and William J. Bolosky from the Microsoft Research Corporation. Brief history on the previous work and studies. In 1981, a researcher studied about 236,000 files, which ultimately resulted in the notion of a file's functional lifetime, which measures the time of it from the time of its creation through to the time of its last modification. In 1984 and 1991, two more research studies were published primarily to support, which results primarily supported the findings from the 1981 study. Though in 1991 there were a few fluctuations in the findings, but ultimately still aligned with the 1981 study. Lastly, in 1994, two research studies were conducted and also published on 48 file systems, Unix systems, and lastly, one of the largest research studies on file system data that had existed at that moment. Ultimately, this is to acknowledge the general understanding that there is an increase in file size and counts of files per user over time. This particular study that I am presenting on, it also acknowledges this trend, and, but more specifically, is investigating the data that exists in Windows operating file systems. Methodology of the study. This study analyzed the data using histograms, collective cumulative distribution functions, and analytical approximations quoted from the text. More specifically, 4,801 Windows computers were analyzed. The data was pulled, and also this was in regards to 4,418 computer users. In other words, people in a variety of different job roles. This all amounted to 10.5 terabytes of data, where the analytical approximations really helped to segue into the distribution functions, thus published as graphs, multiple graphs, actually in the study. The program that was developed traverses the directory tree of each fixed disk file system of a computer, with the attributes, or I should say components of the study, primarily revolved around the file size, file age, file systems, and the user job functions. More on the methodology. The most important table here is the standalone one to the right, where it acknowledges the list of the job categories and also the differing file systems, and of course the counts pertaining to file systems and the job categories. Key terms here: collective cumulative distribution functions. This is defined as a summary of multiple frequency distributions in a single graph. Next, functional lifetime, as stated previously. This is the difference between a file's age and the time since its last access or modified. F lifetime, otherwise known as, indicates the time span over which the data in the file has been useful. Next, compositional granularity. This is defined as the size of the records that compose the file. Next, directory size and directory depth. File and directory size as we typically know it, directory size being most relatably to the organization of the files in the directory. And then also the directory depth. This relates to the levels at which a file can exist at. Think of folders embedded in a folder and so forth. Lastly, the maximum displacement of the cumulative curves. This is largely dependent on the CDF. In other words, the first term top, cumulative distribution functions. MDCC is defined as the greatest absolute vertical separation between the cumulative measured frequency curve and the cumulative analytical frequency curve. Functional output. This is largely as a result of the distributions that were published in, or the graphs, I should say, that were published in the study. First and foremost, file sizes fit a log normal distribution. The greatest takeaway here is that most files are small, but bytes are in the largest of files. Next, file ages and lifetimes fit hyper-exponential distributions. Takeaway here is that there is a little difference in the file age distribution among different user job categories. And then also, similarly, directory sizes fit offset inverse polynomial distributions. The takeaway here is that there is also very little difference in the directory size distribution among different user job categories. Lastly, directory depths fit Poisson distributions. This study found that 15% of all directories are at a depth of 8 levels or greater, as opposed to a previous study that found an average depth of 5 levels. So this study found more, essentially, greater depths. I would like to acknowledge one of the quotes from the text. Researchers say, "We do not claim to have found governing distributions for our observations. We claim only to have developed graphical approximations whose utility is that they provide a highly compact, if not wholly accurate, representation of the empirical data." In other words, these aren't hard set rules. These are merely observations or approximations pertaining to the data set being studied. Some key concepts: file size values suggest that most bytes are found in files composed of records sized in powers of 2. And as stated previously, most files are small, but most of the bytes are in larger files. Excuse me. These next 3 points are sort of interrelational, but distinctly different. Directory sizes are consistent across file systems, but are independent of user job function. File and directory sizes are fairly consistent, but file lifetimes vary widely. The differing component there is that of the job function and also file lifetimes. The last point, job category has little effect on the file and directory sizes, but has a dramatic effect on the file lifetime. So a few key components there, but sort of sound similar, but ultimately acknowledging that there is not correlation between job functions and directory sizes or the lifetime and the file directory sizes or files itself. Lastly, file name extensions are strongly correlated with file size and compositional granularity, but weakly with file age and functional lifetime. More on the file name extensions here shortly. Here's a type review of the top most populous of the most file extensions found in the data set, along with the statistical distribution data derived from the study. Results and contributions. Some supporting results. Directory size and structure are similar to those previously published in 1994, but again, the directory depths were greater, 8 depths versus the 5 depths as previously published. Next, the median file size age is 3 times that as reported in 1975. What contrasts, file systems are about half as full on average, which contradicts a previous study. In summary, file sizes do continue the growth trend observed over the last decade. This was one of the notional points that was mentioned in the first slide. The researchers did find that even within Windows operating systems and file systems, it still supported that same trend as previously acknowledged on Unix systems, though not to the T, subtly different. Again, most files are small, but most bytes are in large files. File ages and types vary according to the job function. File name extensions is a predictor of file size, which was quite a prominent point or understanding that came from the study. Ultimately, adaptive strategies may be helpful in tuning file systems to individuals' work habits or job roles. Impact and relevance. This acknowledges the framework that leads us to today. File systems are still vastly around. Only now it exists in an age where streaming services, cloud infrastructures, mobile devices are much more common, if not the de facto usage for many people. There's also a greater interdependency of the current workforce and data management. More people are using data more intimately. How this fits into data science? Well, data begins with the file types, organization, and volume as it exists in computer systems. In relation to the lecture, we looked at Tika and its ability to detect and parse, sort information, thus leading to people using the data. The structure and the practice of storing files in such systems. This ultimately leads us to the 5 Vs, and again, makes it a lot more relevant in this case. Lastly, the pros and cons. This paper does a great job at establishing relationships between the file systems, directories, and the users. It also does a great job at coherently explaining the methodology, though it is can be at times dense. Was very thorough at getting to the main point. Lastly, which is most important to me, it's timeless and relatable. Again, file systems are still around. It's how we organize our data. Some of the cons, I would have appreciated a more succinct hypothesis, but again, this is a research study. Um, so, in other words, this is a light con, not too heavy on this point. Also, it does sport an overwhelming list of findings, but again, it is evidence, and it does a great job at sorting that evidence to support um, the claims of upholding the previous noted trends that were studied in previous studies. Otherwise, I enjoyed the paper. Thank you.